Hello and welcome to another edition of Around the Valley. It's an exciting time. We are always excited here, but we get more and more excited as things grow and things build. And we've got some questions, we got some answers. There's a lot for us to get through, and so we're just going to jump right in. Joining me this week is Kenny Hodges. Kaylee Harden is unavailable. Kenny, how you doing?
Man, I'm doing great. We're getting into the teeth of the football season a little bit. We're coming out of the early season, week 0, week 1. We're starting to kind of get a feel for who some of these teams are, where some of these teams are going. We got some questions about some of the unbeatens who remain, the handful in our backyard. We've got some questions about some of the teams that are still searching for their first win, and if there's some concern. But we'll get in all of that. Let's start with the week 1 scoreboards. Coming out of week 1, here were the final scores from the game starting on Thursday. Grant went on coming out of week 1. So here's what I asked you, Arshavir. Looking at the scores and looking at everything that happened on Thursday and Friday, is there anything from week 1 that surprised you when you saw out of those games?
Biggest surprise actually is Chatsworth being at 0-2. This is a team that has some returners. They were not, bare in the cupboard at all. There was a lot of excitement, coming in on, coach having a full season, full off season, and being able to continue building what they were building. And here we are. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do this week. But that's a surprise.
For me, there's two games that kind of stuck out to me as surprises. Obviously, that Cleveland-Arleta game stuck out as a bit of a surprise. I thought Cleveland would have a bounce back. I think we all thought that Cleveland would bounce back. But I don't know if any of us saw 70 getting put on the scoreboard against a tough Arleta team. I thought they'd win that game at home, but I didn't see 70 coming. I didn't see them being able to kind of in 1 week sort of really change gears and shift to the philosophy offensively, what they wanted to do in terms of really pounding that rock, really sort of building something around that quarterback who is now kind of in the fill-in for a good now portion of the season, and sort of kind of re-establish an identity that will probably boost them going forward. I thought that was interesting. And the other game,
I got it.
Yeah,
sorry, but before you go into the next piece, I got to say, and this is in kind of defense of that program. Nothing against what Cleveland did. You can only play who's in front of you. Arleta went into that game with only 22 kids on the active roster. They were pretty banged up. So, Cleveland took advantage of a situation they were supposed to take advantage of. And that really kind of changed my perception of the game. As I looked at it, I'm like, oh wow, you had kids playing both ways all game. So that that mitigates it a bit, taking nothing away from what Cleveland did. But just got to put that out there.
No, for sure. But at the same time, to go from week 1, where when they put that quarterback in, they really couldn't move the ball at all, to being able to just in 1 week be able to kind of say, hey, this is sort of what we've established. And because this team doesn't have the numbers to kind of stop it, we can run up, because like I said, I've seen Arleta in these sort of situations before and still be able to kind of keep the game close. Like I said, at the end of the day, as banged up as they were, they still put 37 on the scoreboard. So it's not like this is not a team that doesn't have talent. Yes, they clearly ran out of gas in the second half, but I was just talking in terms of Cleveland being able to sort of build something that, like, okay, this could be sustainable. If we were able to kind of figure this out in 1 week, to be able to get to this point, to be able to put up a 70-point game and take advantage, that might bode well for what they could do the next 5-6 weeks as they kind of try to hold the fort until they get their QB1 back. So that was where the surprise was for me, in terms of just being able, like, okay, it still felt like they were able to be machine-like and be able to take advantage of those weaknesses, when coming out of that Harvard-Westlake game, I wasn't so sure, because they couldn't really move the ball once QB1 went down. The other surprise for me was, man, to see San Fernando, and I was really, really concerned about, man, you play a game on a Saturday, a physical 7-6 contest, you essentially have 4 days to prepare, recover, and then take on a Chavez team that's not. It's never, no matter what condition the program is in. We know how those kids are coached. We know what that game looks like in the trenches. We know what you're going to be in store for. And on a super short week to go put up an effort the way they did against Chavez, I think it says something about the coaching in this program. And I think it says something about the fact that the other teams that we look at the top of the Valley Mission, you guys better be prepared when you play the San Fernando team, because they're building something and they're going to be a tough out this year playing against that team. So those were the two surprises to me. Yeah, I also agree with you, man. I thought Chatsworth would get off to a little bit better of a start. We know this is the first year of a full transition with Street not being there. Maybe that's bearing the weight of it a little bit, kind of having to reestablish, or now you doing things completely different than maybe what the program was used to. And like I said, they haven't had the easiest games, but man, I thought they'd get off to a better start. But those are, I think, the big surprises from week one. All right, so let's change gears, right? So now we're talking about where we stand in terms of our teams here in the Valley. We've got a group of unbeatens. We've got teams that have got a win under their belt. And then we've got a handful of teams that don't have a win yet, as we head into week two, or the third week of games. So let's start with the unbeaten teams. Some of them on here might have been a little bit surprising if we started at the beginning, like, hey, who do we think we're going to get off the blocks hot? San Fernando, Canoga Park, Panorama, Van Nuys, and Taft are all sitting at 2-0. Now, mind you, we all know every 2-0, every 1-1, every 0-2 is not built the same, especially with how some of these teams are scheduling, how our top teams are scheduling. Yes, there's going to be some losses when you're going to playing against Southern Section teams, when you're playing against the top other side teams from the other side of the city. But of that group of unbeaten teams, San Fernando, Canoga, Panorama, Van Nuys, Taft, if I were to ask you who keeps it up the longest, who keeps that O in that loss column the longest out of these two teams, when you look at what's ahead, who would you pick?
Three of the teams are in a position where they can really keep it going the longest. Probably San Fernando, Van Nuys, and Panorama. Again, I should probably throw Taft in there because we don't know if our leader is going to be undermanned or not for 1 week, right? But these three Valley Mission teams are really, really in a position to kind of go on a run and kind of tell Kennedy that, hey, we're not gonna let you just walk your way into what you want this year. And so I think those are the three to really keep an eye on as far as getting the run. And that's not taking anything away from Canoga, another Valley Mission team. So there you go.
It's hard because you expect Canoga. I expected Canoga to show signs that they were kind of going the right direction, which to me they did last year, even though they took a lot of beatings. But you could see it. You could see some of these young guys that were getting a chance to play on varsity were starting to kind of figure some things out halfway through the year. But again, they were another team that was a bit undermanned. They're still trying to build numbers back up in the program, which tends to happen in high school sometimes. Sometimes you just get big senior classes that graduate. Sometimes you just get kids who leave and go other places. So it's been a slow process of trying to build. I think we can say that both for Canoga and Lake Reseda. It's been an excruciating process of just trying to build numbers on top of talent in these programs. But when I look at Canoga and I see they got Hawkins coming, I think that's a winnable game. Rancho Dominguez is a winnable game before they see Panorama after that. I think that they got a chance to get to 4-0, whereas a couple of these other teams like Panorama's got Elko in a couple of weeks, right? So, like, I think I'm going to go with Canoga. I expect Taft to win this game this week, but I just look at Canoga and I have a feeling we might be looking up in a couple of weeks and saying, whoa, this team's 4-0. what is the ceiling for this team this season? Now, am I expecting them to win the Valley Mission? Absolutely not. Of course not. But man, you start to then look at Canoga and say, man, is this a team that could maybe potentially host a couple of playoff games in D3? When the last year we were talking about if they were going to just win a couple and maybe get a chance to even be in the dance. So I'll go with Canoga just based on looking at schedule, knowing that some of these teams have a couple of tough games in the next couple of weeks, but it's going to be fun. It's going to be interesting to see. Now, so let's shift gears to the winless teams. Yes, so like, as I said, not every 0-2 is built the same. Some of these teams have had some gauntlets starting out the year. NoHo, for instance, yeah, not surprised they're 0-2 when your first two games out of the gate are 100-degree on the temperature game on the field against Granada, and then you follow that up going on the road to go play Village Christian, a tough school, right? So not every 0-2 is built the same. So maybe they're not in a pause concern, but when you look at Fulton, Poly, Verdugo Hills, Chavez, Grant, Silmar dropped their opener, Reseda, Chatsworth, that group of teams that are still searching for their first win. What team in that group gives you a pause for concern heading into week 2?
My pause for concern is the 0-2s. I'm never concerned with an 0-1 team. Never. Because, week to week, anything can happen. So we can just chop off most of that list right there. And the remaining 0-2s are Chatsworth, NoHo, Grant, Chavez, Reseda. We touched on this a little bit earlier regarding Reseda. I'm expecting it to be a tough couple seasons. So there's, concern isn't the right words for them. It's just a lot of hope that, they don't lose hope, right? The kids in the program. And the concern for me is obviously Chatsworth, and I'll just right out and say it. The East Valley teams, not so much, mainly because NoHo, the way they scheduled. Chavez is a dog. They're not. We know it, right? Nunez is not going to let this team flounder much longer. Grant has been in games, so Chatsworth is really, really the one where I'm looking at and I'm like, you guys, you're really kind of making me worry here. And your schedule does not get easier. That's the thing. You got whatever you've got left in your non-league, you got 2 more. And then comes your gauntlet. So really, really concerned with Chatsworth. No need to beat a dead horse there. I agree. I'll point out a couple of other ones that are also cause for concern. And that to me is Chavez and like Fulton. And that's because of the precarious sort of position that you sit in when you start talking about projecting forward, not only with what you're going to deal with in league, but also when you sit in that sort of place in the rankings amongst the city teams, when you're talking about D3, then you have to start talking about that bubble. You have to start talking about the fact that it's not just your teams here in your backyard, but it's the teams on the other side of the city that are also sitting in those precarious positions of, okay, we play in tough leagues, wins are going to be hard to come by, but their strength of schedule, just based on who they have to play, will come into account when we start getting into week 8, week 9, week 10, and now you start talking about who's going to get in, who's not, right? Last year, I went back and I looked because I was curious. The only 1-win team that made it into D3, the D3 bracket was Dimely. And that was because, okay, they lost a bunch of players from that team that was awesome from the previous couple of years. But because of who they play in league and that gauntlet of a schedule they run, they still got in as a 15 seed in D3, even though they went 1-9 in regular season. And conversely, when I looked at who got in on our end of the city, Panorama essentially was our last team in as a 9 seed in D3. Now, granted, they would eventually go on and run the table and win that D3 championship. But when you look at the fact that they went 3-3 in the Valley Mission,
Their only non-league win came against George Washington Prep. They went 4-6 in the regular season, and that got them in as a 9 seed. So you start looking at, okay, what's in front of you, what's on the other side of the city that you have to deal with. And if you don't start putting wins together before you start getting into those tough teams in your league play, you're still going to have to play North Hollywood. You're still going to have to play Arleta. And if you think Arleta is an angry team now, when these guys come back from being on the shelf, banged up, they're going to come back even angrier with more of a purpose. And you're going to have to deal with that. Then you're also dealing with teams in your own league that you got to scratch and claw against, like the Grants, like Verdugo, who are also kind of fighting for their playoff lives and playoff position. So when I look at Chavez and I'm seeing like, hey man, it's not going to get much easier from here. You got to start putting W's together, because you could find yourself on the outside looking in and not getting into the postseason, and that's the thing, especially with those teams. And the reason why I point to them is because they're in the East Valley. The East Valley has more teams. That league gets started up next week. You know what I mean? Where you start running the East Valley gauntlet against teams that know you, that know how to prepare for you. And those league wins are just hard to come by. And then even teams at the bottom of the league are going to be better this year. Monroe has already showed this year they're not a cakewalk. They're not a pushover this year. So where are the wins going to come from? So that's where my pause for concern lies. I want to see some of these East Valley teams start putting W's together, because I don't want to get to the end of the season and then have to start worrying if they're going to get into the dance. So that's where I'll leave that. Now, player of the week pick. Last week we didn't pick one, but honestly, the player of the week coming out of week 0 was pretty obvious with what Diego Montez did in that game against Eagle Rock. It was Herculean effort in week 0. So even though we didn't pick one, I think we all know who the player of the week in the city was, let alone the Valley. But we got some good options for player of the week this week. I'll start with you, Arshavir. Who impressed you the most from a player's performance perspective this week that you're locking in for player of the week?
Man, I feel terrible because I'm about to butcher this young man's name. So please.
I know where you're going.
Please.
No, I know where you're going. We're probably going to say that's all right. You can't.
Somebody. I'm telling. Okay, look, this is my plea. All right. Phonetically, somebody tell us how to pronounce this young man's name, because I want to get it right. I want to do him justice. This man deserves his flowers after last week. You know, Moiserelua Odebunmi, bro, over 400 all-purpose yards. He was unstoppable. Yes, undermanned opponent, but he ran roughshod. And when you've got an opponent that you can tire out, you put the ball in the hands of someone who's just going to be a wrecking ball and tire him out faster. And that's what happened. He just was everywhere. Multi-purpose touchdowns all over the place. All those yards. He's my man from Cleveland, Mr. Odebunmi.
Yeah, listen. It's a tough name to pronounce, but let me tell you something. If you're going to keep running the ball like that, we just going to start calling you Big O, because that was impressive to watch. 303 on the ground. But to me, what's even more impressive on top of that is he's also clearly a viable option in their pass game, because he had a couple of catches, he had a couple of receptions for 36 yards and a touchdown as well. So it was an all-around performance for the young man, putting up 339 total yards, all-purpose yards. So yeah, we're gonna go with Mr. Olawumi as the player of the week. We're gonna double down on that. I mean, it was a eye-popping performance for the young man, and like you said, taking advantage of maybe an undermanned team, but he had some incredible plays. He had a 68-yard touchdown run. It was a sight to behold. So congratulations to the young man. Hopefully you can continue to do that all season, because if you can, Cleveland could find themselves in a really good position at the end of the season. So we'll leave that there. Let's go ahead and look ahead to the week 2 slate. When you look at some of the games that we got in our own backyard, we got 4 All Valley matchups with Panorama and Fulton, our leader on the road at Taft, Poly looking for their first win on the road at San Fernando, Selmar and Chavez, a game that reeks of a little bit of desperation maybe for both teams, looking for that first W. Selmar doesn't want to go 0-2. Chavez obviously trying to get their first win. All those games on the schedule, what's one game that intrigues you the most?
Honestly, as much as I want to look at some of our teams that are, racking it up in the win column, I'm flipping to the other side of the ledger, and I'm like, paying close attention to this Chavez and Silmar game. That is one that I'm like, which of these teams is going to kind of right the ship? Chavez has to, because they jump into league play next week. Now the other one that I'm going to really kind of keep an eye on, Panorama Fulton. These two played each other pretty tight last year. Fulton looking to break into the win column. Panorama trying to stay undefeated. They're at Fulton this year. Don't take anything away from either of these teams. They play smash mouth football. So this is about to be literally maybe 60 total minutes. This game will be done in like 80 minutes. And it's going to be smash mouth football all the way. So those are the two that are really standing out right now.
Yeah, those are two games I also clocked. Obviously, that game, that Silmar Chavez game, just sort of reeks of two desperate teams that are like, no, we cannot, we cannot, and we will not lose this week. We have to, because you really do start getting in the danger zone. Chavez has no desire to head into league play at 0-3. Silmar knows in the Valley Mission, you know, your goose is cooked if you start putting too many L's in that column. Because look at what Panorama's doing. Van Nuys is no longer cakewalk. Canoga, you might have to fight, scratch and claw when you see them. You could find yourself being in the basement of that league real fast if you don't figure it out really quickly. Same thing. But that Panorama Fulton game, you're right, is interesting from that standpoint because styles make fights. And this could be one of those where they just kind of go at it and that clock is running and all of a sudden you look up and it's a 1-score game in halfway through the fourth quarter, and a turnover here or a lucky break here or there could kind of turn that game. And those early games can be tricky. If getting high school kids playing football at 4 o'clock when their natural clocks are used to getting things going later in the evening, you just never know. Things tend to happen and when games get played in those early windows. And the other game I will say that I'm kind of intrigued by, I'm also intrigued by that Arleta Taft, because to me it's also kind of a show and prove week for Taft. If you really do intend to contend in the West Valley, and like I said, we all know everybody's chasing Birmingham, but you look up and you see Granada and you see Cleveland and you think that you might be there. Well, Cleveland just gave you the barometer with this beat up Arleta team last week. Can you do the same thing that they did? If you can, then we might actually be starting to have a conversation about just where Taft is coming out of this week, if they can do the same thing. If they can't, if our leader can kind of come in and maybe squeak out a win, then we're kind of having more of a conversation about leveling off where Taft is. But if Taft comes out of this 3-0 and kind of has a repeat of what we just saw Cleveland do, we might have to start having a conversation about, is Taft right there in that same category, in terms of like, are they the second team in the West Valley? Are they ready to challenge a Birmingham or keep it close, or against Granada and keep it close kind of deal? So that's why I really do got my eye on that game as well. So before we get out of here, obviously, and last week, yes, I kind of skated out the back door without giving predictions, but it's just me and Arshavir this week, so I don't think I can avoid that same fate. Now, let's look at some of these games. Obviously, we just kind of talked about Arleta Taft. We'll start with that one. We'll have a game prediction. Arleta Taft, who do you think is going to win that game?
Still kind of smitten with the firepower at Taft right now. I think they take it.
Yeah, I agree there. I think Taft takes it as well. the only stick in my craw is I remember the last time these two teams played in the regular season, and it was a circus. So if there's any of that sort of magic that's still there, that could be for an interesting one. But yeah, with our leader being a little bit banged up, I do fully expect Taft to kind of take Nathan Swinson to have a field day, and they kind of take advantage and get 3-0. Okay, Hawkins at Canoga. Are we ready to start buying into this Canoga hype a little bit in terms of not are they going to win the Valley Mission, but is this team a team that can kind of be a fly in the ointment this year for some of the better teams? I think this game could be a good barometer. Hawkins at Canoga, who you got winning?
I was there and I was thinking about it, but it wasn't too much to think about it ultimately. I think Canoga goes 3-0.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I'm ready to buy in. Like I said, I know some of that young talent. Last year felt like it was on the cusp of kind of figuring some stuff out. In the first couple of weeks, it seems like they absolutely have. So I'm right there with you. I'm picking Canoga as well. Panorama at Fulton. Early game window that we just talked about. Panoramas looked really good at the start of the year. Fulton's going to be a little bit desperate to kind of get that first win under his belt heading into East Valley play. Who you got this week?
See, this is the feet to the fire game for me. I got a real soft spot for both of these programs. Honestly, since I haven't been able to get, put an eye on either of these teams, I'm going to say Fulton with the upset.
I would not be surprised if Fulton pulled the upset. I just think that the way Panorama plays, man, that defense and physicality tends to travel well. I think you can clearly see that what they sort of figured out last season about themselves at the end of the season and carried into postseason, they have brought that same lunch pail mentality into the beginning of this year. I think they keep it rolling. I expect Panorama to move to 3-0. Final game. This one is an interesting one. We haven't kind of touched on it yet. Crespi on the road at Cleveland. We know how treacherous these games are when you're playing against these Southern Section schools. But Cleveland at home tends to play well, even when they're playing against upper echelon opponents. They figured out some things. They figured out they got a real bell cow at running back that maybe can change the math a bit on a game like this. Crespi at Cleveland, who you got?
Interesting note that we don't, bring up too much. Crespi is another one of our schools here in the Valley. Mm-hmm. It's one of those schools that we want to get to. It's a school I've been kind of keeping an eye on in different ways. And so they're off to a start that I'm intrigued by in different ways, but I really like the way things came together for Cleveland, and I think they pull out a tough one. I think it's going to be a good battle. I think Cleveland pulls it out.
Yeah, like I said, I think when you look at week 0, yes, Cleveland lost 21-0, but if there were 4 plays that made the difference in that game, in terms of just some missed assignments or some miscommunication in the secondary where they gave up some deep balls. But for the most part, they were able to hold their own defensively against a team that is supposed to be better than them, like in the trenches in their front 7, right? This Cleveland team is very tough, and they always hold their own. Crespi has traditionally been a team that our city kids can play. We have been able to play with and stay in games with when they've come across them. So I'm with you there too. I think that it's going to be tough, but I could see Cleveland walking out of here with a 1-score win, playing at home. If they win, that's probably what it looks like. If they were to blow Crespi out, we're going to have a completely different conversation of what this season looks like. But so I'm not expecting that. But listen, call us homers, but We believe in our kids. We believe in these coaches and these programs. And I think they can pull out a tough win at home against Crespi. So on that note, we will wrap it up right there. We are looking forward to an exciting week 2 slate. We got a lot of things coming down the pipe. Next week, be looking out for another one of our roundtables where we kind of take we'll kind of take the temperature at the quarter pole of the season, what we've seen so far, and questions that we'll have going forward, going in as we kind of marching towards the midway point. So be looking out for that. Make sure you check out Valley Sports Telegram for our weekly gems. For the power list for football, we have the volleyball list coming out this week as well. I know that people will be looking out for that. And make sure you continue to check us out for all our coverage. Our writers out in the field, they're covering these games. We got coach interviews. Make sure you go to our social medias. Go to VST Media on Instagram. Check out our VST Media page on YouTube. We'll have plenty of goodies there. And as always, thank you guys for supporting. And we will continue to bring you this coverage of our kids in the Valley like nobody else is. So for Arshavir Sarian and for your boy Kenny Hodges, we'll check you guys next week. Peace.